Welcome to Forward-Looking Teaching Design. The future is more of a mirror than a crystal ball. Karen and Zala, feel free
Zala.
Zala, sorry. Feel free to take it away.
All right, thank you very much. So, at any rate, we've been taking a look at this, especially during the pandemic time. Karen and I have both been working with faculty in several different systems on different campuses, and working with them in the opportunity of redesigning courses, especially moving from that sort of emergency remote teaching to well-designed classes that are going to be dual delivery, courses that you can switch and pivot on a dime kind of a thing and make happen quickly. So all the things that people have been going through, this is going to be an opportunity for us to really kind of talk about that, a little bit of some of the work that we've done in the Online Course Design Institute, as well as information we've gathered from faculty of what their experience was in this whole idea of forward-looking teaching and the kinds of things that we're going to need to do. And so that's where we're going to be, and we're going to ask for your contributions as we go through this as well. So at any rate, we'll get things rolling here. So let's stop and just think for a moment of the difference between backward-looking teaching and forward-looking teaching. And forward-looking teaching is really going to give effective teaching for significant learning when it comes to not teaching the way that we all were taught in the past, but it really begins to take a look at the future, what's needed for the future. When Karen and I first started working with faculty back in, let's say April, I think it was, of 2020, and the pandemic was there and people were trying to figure out what they needed to do for the rest of the spring semester, excuse me, as well as summer and fall semesters. They were going to be taking a look at, suddenly a lot of people were caught with I've only taught face to face, I haven't used all the LMS tools, I haven't done these things. And so they weren't prepared. Others were very prepared because they've already been doing a lot of online teaching. They were relying on their LMS. They knew what they were doing with that. And so there was a great disparity between faculty on campuses doing that. So I think the biggest thing that we wanted to take a look at is, what is this forward-looking teaching? It's making classrooms and online learning environments relative to connect to future learning opportunities. I think sometimes we thought we were doing that, but we weren't doing it using everything that we could have been doing. And we really want to sort of work with that true lifelong learning, the things that we need to be able to do with students. We also wanted to evolve the perspectives into more of a polycentric kind of thinking, bringing in more inclusive and diverse ways of thinking, bringing different cultures in, bringing in a variety of experiences so that students could relate to who they were and they could see themselves moving into the fields and the disciplines that they wanted to. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we're designing courses that weren't just using publishers' agendas and materials, but really centered around the expertise of faculty who were going to work with students to help shape their thoughts and to be able to prepare them for the future workplace, which was going to be ever changing. So one of the things I'd like to introduce you to is the cycle of course design. And we wrote the book called Designing Effective Teaching and Significant Learning. And so as we look through the cycle of course design, in the lower left-hand corner, we begin to look at everything starting from situational factors, what's going into a course, everything that moves up the left-hand side to deliver significant learning. And so as we do that, you will see a lot of the elements of what QM talks about, the things that you've been working with QM, the things that you've been learning about at this conference, the whole idea of this teaching strategy alignment between outcomes, activities, and assessments. It's also going to be adding to the information that DFINC was working with a long time ago, 10 years ago, and got really into this whole idea of design communication, accessibility, integrated learning technologies. And those were vital right now, especially what we learned in the pandemic. It becomes extremely important that we have all of those things in place for significant learning. And campuses really had to spend some time looking at what they had and what they didn't have, and moved quickly to try and make sure that that happened. On the right-hand side of that flow chart, we begin to take a look at the assessment models, assessing effective teaching through the quality of your course, the assessing the student learning, making sure that that experience is great for students. How was your program department assessment, institutional assessment, and then finally going back down to thinking about your own teaching practice and course reflection and the learning how to learn. What did you need to do in professional development to keep learning and growing, much like we want our students to be able to do once they hit the workplace and they're going to continue learning more about what's going on. So let's take a look at the first area of the book that we call starting, and that's the situational factors. A lot of the times in designing a course, what becomes important where people start is just one step higher. They start with outcomes, they start with activities, they start with assessments, and they start piecing this all together. But we think that there's a planning stage that needs to take place before that. So in this planning stage, we begin to take a look at some of the elements that take place that you need to really kind of consider, whether this is a course that you're designing for the very first time, or it's a course that you frankly are going to be teaching that you've already taught. You want to redesign it, you want to make it maybe the online version of it, you wanted to be able to do something more with it. Maybe it needs to meet new credentialing standards or something that way, or new accreditation standards as you go through. So as you can see, and it's a little difficult to read this whole chart, but we want to look at the situation, we want to look at the expectations, we want to look at the nature of the discipline and the subject itself. Who are the learners walking into this course, and what about you as the instructor, or what are the qualities that the instructor has that they're going to be able to bring to this course? Two of those areas that become kind of important are going to be this characteristics of learners and characteristics of teachers. We've been spending a lot of time in the last 18 months taking a look at it. So we've got great discussions taking place on cultural responsive teaching and pedagogy. Again, forward-looking reflection. Who's in the course? Who are future clients and customers you're going to be working with? And who are you going to be working with as future colleagues? These become kind of critical frames for students to be able to see where they're going with the information, and they need to be able to identify themselves in your course so that they have these things. And so as we look at that, one of the other areas that we thought was really pretty critically important and yet didn't get a lot of attention was this whole idea of designing courses that were centered either around introverts or extroverts. And so when you think about your learners, is your course designed so that introverts will be successful and extroverts will be successful? We also looked at that as the characteristics of the teacher. And one of the things that we found that happened is that if you were an extrovert as a teacher, you tend to design your course in the viewpoint of an extrovert. If you're an introvert, you tended to design yours through the viewpoint of an introvert. So, actually had an opportunity to work with one of our other colleagues that works with us on this course, and part of what happens is that we have a thing that we wrote for Inside Higher Ed back in the beginning of August that really kind of breaks this down and takes a look at it a little bit more. And I think we'll get an opportunity if Karen wants to pop that in the chat feature so you can click on that. It's a short read, but kind of an informal way, an informative way of being able to take a look at what we have going forward. And as you think about your courses itself, are they designed so that both introverts and extroverts will be able to be successful? When we work with the faculty on this online course design institute, one of the things that we do is we get them to think about the big dream. What's the big dream for your course? This mission statement. And the mission statement is really going to drive the reason for the course. For students, this answers the question, why do I need to take this course? Or what good is this course going to do me in the future? And so they get an opportunity to really sort of break this down. They'll know this up front. you'll be able to get them to reflect on it and think about how this course is going to be important in the course itself, in the curriculum that you're working with, and finally in their workplace and professional lives. And so what we really encourage faculty to do is develop their big dream and make sure that they share the big dream with their students. Now, when we've been teaching with the pandemic pedagogy, some of the things that we found is that people were really reflecting on what's going to work best. And we tend to call this the next normal because we know that the Delta variant goes away, another variant may come along. We don't know how much longer this quote unquote pandemic is going to be. What's the next pandemic? What are the other teaching challenges that are going to come that are going to really take us by surprise, or that we can start strategically planning for now? So we want to make courses that have that dual delivery. You can pivot them easily. I don't know. We're from Minnesota, so we're used to snowstorms closing us down. I've been working with some companies and some educational institutions in Greece. We had a lot of fires. Those of you from the West Coast, you have a lot of fires. We know that that can really interrupt what's happening for students getting to campus. We know that there's other kinds of things with floods and whatever else that get in the way of being able to deliver this education. So as it's safe, we know that sometimes homeschooling or learning on your own online is going to need to take place, even if it's for a short-term kind of thing that way. And so what we're going to be doing is sharing some of these pandemic experiences with you today that we've picked up from doing sessions at international conferences, and that we've gathered from faculty and instructional designers who've participated in the Online Course Design Institute. So let's talk about design for a minute. This is where, again, QM does a great job with all this, really getting us to focus on the outcomes, the assessments, the learning activities, the feedback that's provided, so that we're really getting an opportunity to dig deep and get this. This is, I think, this is where we tend to spend most of our time in the teaching realm of it. Not necessarily, the design up front is great, but this is where we spend all of our time with our students. So back in 2013, Dee Fink threw this out as the integrated course design, and we've worked with Dee quite a bit. He actually wrote the foreword for our book, and so one of the things that becomes really important is that you took those situational factors and then you started to apply them as you developed the learning outcomes and your assessments and your activities. And you had an opportunity we tend to like to use his taxonomy because it does a couple of different things. It works great for 4-year people. It works great for 2-year institutions, 2-year programs, career and technical education, as well as general education, because it really focuses on these aspects of foundational knowledge, application, integration, but it also does a lot of things that faculty wanted to spend a tremendous amount of time with. And that is, they wanted their students to know themselves. They wanted their students to work well with others. And we know that employers are looking for great team members to be part of their organization. We also take a look at, we wanted students to value the information, the content, and the discipline that they were going to be moving into. And so we needed to help develop those interests and those values that we work with that. And we also knew that students needed to learn how to learn themselves. I don't know about you, but I've taught everything from 3rd grade to graduate level. And one of the questions I got continuously from everybody was, how am I doing? And yet we didn't spend a lot of time teaching students to effectively assess themselves to see how they thought they were doing. We spent a lot of time with them trying to satisfy the teacher to get a good grade. And so we don't want courses like that anymore. We want courses where students and as teachers, we're spending time with them, helping them to develop what it is that they need to do so that they know when they leave us and they may come back for graduate school, they may come back for additional coursework. They may be able to pick up things through professional journals and whatnot, and through workshop opportunities at their place of employment. Then they're going to have to be doing that much more. They're going to be much more self-directed in their learning moving forward. You'll also notice that with Dee's taxonomy of significant learning, it uses both the cognitive side on the right, the affective side on the left. A lot of people use Bloom's. Bloom's is wonderful. Bloom's has the cognitive laid out for you. What a lot of people don't ever get to is they don't ever go to and look at Bloom's affective work and the kinds of things that are there as well. And so Dee's circle, this pie-shaped circle, gives us an opportunity to keep all of this in our mind as we're going through it for the very first time. And faculty are finding that this is really making sense because it's hitting on the strong points of what they want to be able to teach. And so we spent time working with them on this idea that we had a 3-column table so that they would work on the outcomes, they'd work on the assessments, they'd work on the learning activities. And by designing for both face-to-face and online, you get that dual delivery of the assessment or the learning activity design, so that if you have to flip the switch, you need to pivot, you're going to be able to do that. And of course, we do this for each of those 6 domains that we saw in the previous slide. One of the things that we ended up doing as a result of working with the faculty way back in the early part of the pandemic is that many of them wanted to be able to include their unit objectives or competencies. And when we think about the QM model, we have not only the course outcomes, but we do have unit objectives and competencies in there. They also wanted to have a place to talk more a little bit about time and resources for the assessments. What's it going to take in a face-to-face situation? How much time is it going to take in an online? Because they started to realize some of their online assessments are taking longer than some of their face-to-face ones. So they wanted to be able to really sort of map that out. And so we hence sort of made this now the 6-column table that they can look at. So we want to get you involved now. All right. So if you go to your chat feature, would you think about your experiences over the last 18 months, especially, and what kinds of changes have you made in your teaching and your course design and the modifications you needed to make in taking this from a face-to-face to a totally online experience? And what have you learned about the things that you needed to do to be able to make your course great for students? We'll share some of those in a minute. I'll also share some of them on the slideshow in the next few minutes as we go through here. So give you a minute of quiet to be able to think about that and share and chat.
Okay, we're getting some up, like activities that were graced in person had to be tweaked to use online. They can't just be transferred directly. Included more voiceovers and videos and things like that. Added more formative assessments so students were more aware of what they were and were not understanding before they got to the summative assessment. Instructional videos that are organized and directed towards specific concepts. More videos, more detailed instructions, more voiceover videos, a blend of technology, media, and visual, virtual office hours, many videos, more details about objectives, more videos with closed captioning, and made sure pictures were all ADA compliant. Those were all good things to do.
You can see that you've just mentioned a lot of things that faculty have told us in the past as well, and instructional designers, the things that they needed to start including much more of in the process of designing a course for today. And yet these are now best practices. I mean, they're best practices even when we don't have the pandemic. These are still going to be great practices to have. But you'll notice that I think one of the things that took place is we began to start thinking about what it is that we needed to do. We started thinking about our work a lot more. We took less for granted. We realized that we needed to support students, whether that be through instructional videos, through better instructions about what they needed to be able to do, things that we normally could have seen their faces on and said, oh, I don't think they're understanding this. Let me go over this again. Some of those kinds of pieces we needed to really change in the way that we did this. So those are great. Thank you for those responses. We're going to ask.
The last one was about more flexibility with assignments or choice. And I think that was an important one. We all learned we had to be more flexible, more open to choices.
That's right. And people really started to take a look at which were the assignments that were critical versus which were assignments that we just did, because knowing of the time, knowing of maybe providing those options for students, there was going to be different ways of doing it. And you wanted to be able to keep them engaged and be able to give them some sort of choice, because nobody had control of their lives. You as a faculty member didn't. In teaching the course, they really didn't have control of their lives. They were just surviving to try and get on and be part of your class and go through all kinds of things that we'll talk about as we go through here yet. So that's nice. We're going to take just a moment and I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and she's going to talk about this whole idea of designed communication. One of the things that faculty told us was, yeah, I respond to emails as quickly as I can. I do those types of things. That's all great. The problem gets to be there wasn't a plan. And so Karen's going to tell you more about that.
So what we want in our courses is we do want a sense of community, okay? We want our students to be engaged and active. And if we build our course community and have that engagement built in through intentionally designed communication, that will really help. Many faculty in the workshops have stated that they really hadn't had a chance to think about intentional course communication that way. They knew they did communication throughout the course, but it wasn't something that they had a plan. So we're suggesting that you have a plan up front. We had a session on this Wednesday, but have a plan up front, something you can modify slightly for each of your classes, but have it for the whole.
Excuse me, your audio is really bad.
Yeah, Karen, if you might need to be closer to your mic.
So have a plan that will include things you could have in your course and that you could duplicate easily by slight modification for any of your other courses, okay? And so, but this is intentional. We're not looking at quantity. We're looking at just the quality of your communication with your students, that back and forth. Videos are good. Feedback from assignments or assessments or anything is always good. Announcements can be good. Text messages can be good. Emails, there's lots of different ways, but like I said, some of it you put already in your course syllabus, I'm sure. Sometimes you may have an orientation or not. So there's different ways we can get this, but think about your audience and think about what you want to say and when you want to say it. And if you develop a plan, you could tell your students at the beginning of the course, like every Friday at noon, I'm going to send you an email or post an announcement talking about what we're going to do for the next week, something so the students are looking for that piece of information, that connection with you, other than just the connection they may have with a, one-on-one email or through a discussion. So detailed, specific course communication plan, depending on your LMS, if it's an online class, your LMS may have things to help you with this. They may have notifications that will notify students, 2 or 3 days before a quiz is due or 2 or 3 days before an assignment are due. They may have the text messaging. They may have an app. I know I use D12 Brightspace and we have a Pulse app. We have notifications. Students can get text messages or emails. We have intelligent agents, which this teacher can use strings and put in parameters and have personalized looking messages go out to students. So, every LMS has certain features like this. And so use these tools. They will save you time that, you can get the general population done and still have time to handle those as needed cases. So students that really need more one-on-one.
All right. So let's in chat again, talk about some of the changes that you made in course communication. Those could be with your students. They could be on campus with colleagues, staff, administration. What did you find that you needed to do differently during the last 18 months that became much more of a thought process than just simply going through and doing what you had been doing prior to COVID?
I see some people have used Zoom as a more personal communication. Okay, increase their communication, weekly check-ins, those are all good. You can use Zoom and post office hours or help hours or anything you want. You can use Zoom in so many different ways. Weekly check-ins are always good. Twice weekly emails, one to introduce the concept and second as a due date. Okay, and Zoom office hours, excellent. More frequent Zoom meetings with groups and individuals, definitely. Using Zoom breakout rooms for group work, that's another good idea.
One of the things that faculty told us a lot about in the last 18 months has been this idea that they needed to be more empathetic. They needed to be more flexible. There were shout outs to students using their names, making sure that you had some other kinds of things involved with the course, maybe to reduce stress, doing those check-ins to not only talk about, hey, how's the paper coming along or how's this project coming along, but really looking at that sort of social and emotional health. How are you doing as a person? How are you, dealing with all of this?
Someone said they have a general cafe discussion. I've always done that. I call it Cyber Cafe, and it's for any questions that are somewhat related to the class that, because students are on much more often than the teacher is. So another student could get back to you in, a matter of minutes, where the teacher may check into it once or twice a day. So that's always a good way.
All right, Karen, why don't you continue on talking about the accessibility features and the things that we started to realize that even though it's law, we still needed to do it and do more of it.
Well, and it's true. We've had accessibility and accommodations, and they are different. I know when I started teaching 30 years ago, it was more accommodations. I'd find out maybe two weeks to 4 weeks before a course started that I'd have a blind student, and they'd ask me for my textbook, and then they'd have someone put it in Braille for that student. So that's what it was 30 years ago. If I had a deaf student, they'd make sure I had some interpreters. My classes were 3 and 4 hours long, so usually at about halfway point, one interpreter hands would be tired and she'd leave and another one would come in. But it has changed since that. Right now, accessibility means access for everyone, no matter if it's if something is hidden and you don't know about it, okay? So that is the law, and it has been the law, and it's, schools have been taken to court now and big hefty fines. And so you got to make sure that not only the material you put online is accessible, but that your LMS is accessible, any other sites that you link to are accessible. So, and that's up to you. So most states have a state organization that has it. So this is Minnesota's. Minnesota's got one where you can check out documents, multimedia, regular meetings, social media, maps, webs, apps, lots of different ways. So this is one that anybody in the whole state of Minnesota or anywhere could use. But it's an example of one that gives you lots of different ideas and things to look for and places to check. If you want to run through a web page and see how it comes out. Many of the LMSs now have accessibility that you can get for them. I know Blackboard has had Ally, and I know D12 now is putting some Ally in, and that's really nice. It's nice when you take what you think you know and make it accessible and then run it through the Ally checker and find out you're 98% compatible with accessibility. So I've done that in my last 5 courses and been very pleased that it really does pinpoint the areas that you're weak on and have you go back and look at. So please keep in mind that accessibility is access for everyone, anytime, anywhere. And the hard part is the online. And it's not just closed captioning. It's not just, what we used to think of as accommodations. It's for anybody. I like Read Speaker, the text to speech. I have students that don't have a documented disability, but they love Read Speaker. They love having been able to read something and then having it read to them, or have it read to them first and then reread it. So some of my students say that they used to have to read a chapter in a book 5 times before they really understood all the terms and everything. And now it has helped them. So like I said, any of these accessibility things can be helpful for people, even people you don't realize that will help. So it's not just course, it's like I said, all the content material. And so you need to have these discussions if you haven't had them at your campuses. And then part of what we found out in the pandemic is part of making it accessible is making sure students and faculty had the equipment, which meant the laptop or the computer or the tablet or whatever they're using, and an internet connection. Okay, so it's kind of even broadened out to everything that could make you get access to your material, not just ADA. So you need to look through your course materials, make sure they do meet ADA compliance, and make sure, like I said, the third-party vendors, okay, all have an accessibility built in. If not, don't use them anymore, okay? And there's many out there, many free games, free puzzles, things like that that aren't accessible, okay? Faculty have been using them for years and they have to think about them now, go out there and check them out, see if they're accessible. So like I said, there's been additional barriers put up, such as transportation problems, childcare, like I said, having the right equipment. Some schools have been putting hotspots in school buses, sitting in parking lots so students could get access. Whatever we need to do for our students. Some faculty have created, some schools have created checkouts for students to check out a laptop from the college so they could continue with their coursework during the pandemic. There's been emergency funding for students and for faculty that didn't have the equipment at home. Faculty may have had a desktop, but maybe they didn't have a webcam, okay? Faculty maybe didn't have the right kind of lights, the right kind of microphone, headset, that type of thing. There was a school that put the hotspot in. And the other thing to remember is that you need a kind of a quiet space. So hopefully, I know some students, if there's parents and students working from home, try to go in separate rooms. Hopefully there'd be a door. I saw somebody working in a bathroom one day because that was the only room in their house that had a door where somebody wasn't in there. So whatever you can do to, get that quiet, help your students get that quiet place that they need to be active, to be interactive and keep in touch online. So it's a lot more than just what we thought about, which leads us into the whole learning technologies piece, okay? We don't want to use technology just to use it. So like I said, to tech or not to tech, okay? So assess what you really need, okay? If it could improve your course or your learning outcomes, that's great, okay? If it gives the student better practice, like it's a simulation or something, or access to an information or experience that will help them master it better, that's great. If it's something found in the workplace for the skills that you're teaching, that's fantastic. If it's something in the workplace that just keeps them update, that's fantastic. If it simply engages your students and gives them more of that active learning and makes that a priority, that's great. But we don't want to just add tech to add tech, okay? We want it for a reason. So we'd like you to share your experiences of any changes you made in your course accessibility and or your learning technology to help students move along in this online environment in the last 18 months. So if you quick jot down and chat something that you've done that made a change. Well, somebody had students sitting in a closet. Well, that's One step up from a bathroom, I guess. You do it. I haven't heard of that one. That sounds.
Karen, we're having troubles with your mic again.
I'll have to check out the You Do It. I haven't seen that one yet. Anybody else out there use Ally like I was using? It's pretty new around here for us. Oh, somebody's using Ally. Good. Somebody's using Soft Chalk. I just went to the Soft Chalk accessibility one before this. Good. Okay. Brickfield tool for Moodle. I haven't heard of Brickfield before either. I'll have to jot that one down.
I'm going to guess, like everything else, there's a lot of new companies that are developing things. You know, they saw an opportunity, and I think they're moving forward on all this. Well, let's move over to the right-hand side of that flow chart, and let's talk about the assessment side of it. And the first one that we're going to take a look at is going to be course quality. So as we take a look at course quality, basically there's some ways to informally assess your course quality. We want to answer the question, is my course good? Or is my course great? You know, how do I know? And sometimes, you know, we all know that students tell us when we're doing a great job, if they really enjoy our course or they really enjoy you as the instructor. And then they'll also let you know if they don't enjoy it. But we don't kind of learn about that middle group of people that are in there and what are they getting from it, what aren't they getting from it. But there are some ways to go ahead and take a look at informally assessing your course. One is you can test drive it. You can get an opportunity to take a look at what's going on there. You get the opportunity to have colleagues look at it and everything that way. You can measure the quality as you're teaching through self-created surveys. Some of you may be using those. Reflective course shell discussions where students are telling you what they're gaining from the exercises and the things that they're learning from. You've got the forward-looking assessments, the ones that say things like, the whole idea of how is it that you're going to be able to use this in the workplace? How do you see yourself doing that? You've got the cats and lats that we learned about many years ago, but yet they're still very effective. And then, of course, after you get done teaching, there's sort of institutional course evaluations, and then there's the opportunity to sort of self-assess by using a course design rubric. The formal assessments come in the ways of those end of course surveys. You've got peer-reviewed course design opportunities like Quality Matters. You've got advisory council reviews for those of you who have advisory councils in your program areas. You've got accreditation visits and the whole program review process that you have on your campus where you begin to really look at those things in depth. So again, some of the things that you did, and this is these are 4 examples. I know you can't read that part, so I'll make it a little bit bigger. But we ended up, for the book and for a couple of the community and technical colleges here in Minnesota, we developed this set of rubrics that blended some of the QM standards along with the DFINC work, along with what people on our campuses were using as their best practices. So you can see here again, sort of this whole idea of the course overview assessment. This one was actually created for some people that were in customized training, because they weren't getting any sort of support on the non-credit side. And so how do you make sure that those courses that they were delivering, and even in our online course design institute, we've had people from customized training that have gone in there, and I thought, wow, I never thought about how we should be really measuring the quality of the courses that we're providing for people out in the community that way. So in chapter 4, share some of your experiences. How do you assess your courses? How do you make sure that your courses are good? What tools are you using that you find valuable, that you get a lot of great information from.
First one says ensure all essential QM standards are met. That's a good way to start.
Yes.
After you get all faculty to buy in. Does anybody use peer review, or do you have a committee that looks over online courses, or any of that? Different schools do it different ways. Review processes. Final review is from the dean. Okay. Lots of checklists, including QMs. Peer review. Yep. Dean review. Okay. 2 committees that review curriculum before we post anything. Oh, that's really interesting.
Being mindful of time, we're going to keep moving on. Thank you for sharing these things. These will all, by the way, we're going to take these, we'll scrub your names and everything like that off from there, and we'll include the chat ideas with our conference materials. So if you go back to our description in the program, there's a place for us to upload materials. So these slides are there and other things are there. So you get a chance to see that. We'll put the chat up there too. So you'll see that, but your names will all disappear. So you won't have to worry about saying anything. So let's take a look at assessing student learning. And we all know that there's a lot of flavors of student assessment, and there's 2 really kind of ways that we want to be able to do that. One is we're going to be assigning grades. That's one of the things. But the other side of it is how do we really take a look at program or department quality? How are your students learning? How are they advancing? And what can you use as the strengths that you have for doing that? And by using reflection, by using a lot of reflection, and that's a lot of what we've talked about so far in this whole idea, is gaining a lot of the information. That's why it's not a crystal ball in which we're going to predict the future. We're really using reflection and reflective assessment to be able to really plan and strategically plan for the future. So in assessment, you've got informal assessment, formal, you've got formative and summative, you've got backwards and forward looking, and then you have auditive versus educative. So let's take a look at the last one, especially what is this whole educative assessment piece. And when we do that, you'll notice that on the left-hand side, we have auditive assessment. That's backward looking. Backward looking works great for foundational knowledge. That's where you're asking people to names, dates, places, all that kind of stuff. It's really building that foundation of material. What are some of the basic concepts in your class? Great to use tests, quizzes, those kinds of things to be able to get that information. Students can do some of those things on their own, self-quizzes and things like that. You can do those quickly in your LMS so that they get an opportunity to take a look at that. The educative assessment is where we really start to see the growth. It's forward-looking, which also means that for all of the areas, the domains that are everything but foundational knowledge, you really get a chance to get students looking toward the future as to how they're going to not only apply the information, how they're going to use it, how they see themselves using this and being one of these kind of people in the profession, how they become an expert in the profession. You've got self-assessment, one of the things that some of you probably have been doing quite a bit. You've got the whole idea of using rubrics in criteria and standards. And then finally, this idea of the feedback that you're delivering, that it's frequent, immediate, it's based on that criteria of a rubric, it's loving, it's respectful, and so that's what it comes down to. Fidelity is a word that Dee coined back in the 2003 version of Life, and we probably have changed that a little bit more now. But really what you do is you get better learning, you get the significant learning we're talking about, and you have authentic assessment, authentic grading. And it's grading that tells students something more. Even the assessment should be learning activities when you think about it. When I get done reading what you have told me about my work, I should be able to grow with it. So what I'd like you to do right now is, what are your strategies that you find you get the most progress of seeing students grow when you assess them in especially online learning in your courses now, that you'll maybe continue using even if you go back to face-to-face?
Video feedback on essays. Solid feedback. Mhm. Comparative assignments can be helpful.
I think what we started to see is that there were more eyes on the material at times. Some of your assignments could be done with some peer review up front, things that could be corrected and changed before they get to your desk, before you see them, before you give your professional critique and make the comments on. I know a lot of people are using the whole idea of audio feedback from their LMS right now, and being able to talk through some of these elements and some of the processes. I hope some of you are having your students actually fill out the rubric ahead of time and turn it in with your assignments. And get their viewpoint of what they're envisioning and what they see is happening there. That becomes pretty important. It's a great process for them. And it's the kind of thing they're going to need to do in the workplace, is to be able to look at their own work and decide if it's good, if it's meeting the criteria, if it's looking professional. And those are great skills that we need to make sure students graduate with. Well, let's take a moment and look at the whole idea of program and department assessment, because we can't just have assessment in a course. We really need to take it beyond all of that. And so this slide really kind of shows you this idea of all the assessments in blue on the top here, everything from a unit to a course outcome to a course survey, giving you feedback about the course and the teaching, the department or program assessments, all the way up to institutional assessments. It's this pathway that becomes important, so that in a unit of a course, you are able to actually measure department assessments and institutional assessments. And so many of you have gone through that process or are going through that process right now, and that becomes really, really important to be able to do that. We're working with a college here in Minnesota that is going through that process right now, and they're using eLumen as part of it, and they're sending their faculty through our online course design institute. And what's happening is that they're finding great a great mix there. They're finding that it matches up beautifully for what they're trying to do and accomplish. So they're looking at their outcomes all over again and really redesigning those based on that look. The last part of what we're going to be working and talking about today is really going to be this reflection piece. And so as we look at the reflection practice cycle, you'll notice that much like the whole course design cycle. Faculty are learning from teaching literature, you're using it in your courses, you're assessing its effectiveness, you're sharing that information with colleagues, you're reflecting on what you're seeing with your own teaching and how you see students progressing and learning, and then you go through that cycle again and you're learning from even more there. My question to you is simply this: how does reflection of practice play a role in your professional learning experiences? What is it that you do? Oftentimes we are so busy doing the work, we don't stop and take the time to reflect. So how do you make sure you have reflection time worked into your job so that you can perform at your very best?
Set aside time to read student surveys and comments. Currently, I don't have a reflection time, but would like to start building one in. Another person keeps a running list as a note on my cell phone with changes I want or need to make. A lot of students do reflection, but I haven't taken the time to do it myself. I need to do that. Another says having contact with other faculty and coworkers.
Well, we know we threw a lot of information at you, and it's really part of this whole idea of designing courses, and some of it you're well familiar with, some of it it may be newer to you. And so at any rate, we invite you to get in touch, keep in touch with us, talk with us. You can go to encoreprodev.com. That's where we're keeping all kinds of resources for people. You can get book information there. You even get a discount code, a 20% discount code if you'd like that. If you want to take a photo of this page, because I know you got to get going, and other things like that. We're going to stay on for a couple minutes for questions or anything you'd like to share with us that way. But thank you very much. We enjoyed getting a chance, and thank you for your participation. We'll get this chat stuff, we'll scrub it, and get a chance by tomorrow for sure, get it uploaded so you can take a look at some of these great ideas that you've shared. So thank you very much.